What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the latest installment into the current Monsterverse, and that movie is called Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire. Once again directed by Adam Wingard, who also wrote this film alongside Jeremy Slater, Simon Barrett, and Terry Rossio. This film stars people like Rebecca Hall, Brian Tyree Henry, Kaylee Hoddle, Dan Stevens, and more. And before we get too far into this, let's talk about that title really quickly, because there's been a lot of various thoughts as far as how to pronounce the title of this movie. Is it another Godzilla versus Kong, which I don't think it is? Is it Godzilla x Kong, which I think is what most people are going to call it? Or is it something like Hunter x Hunter or Spy Family that don't use the X and it's just called Godzilla Kong: The New Empire? Who knows? I'm very curious. So how do you guys pronounce the title of this movie? I think most people are going to say Godzilla x Kong. And yeah, I really don't know what people are going to say about this movie when it comes down to its title, but you're not here for that. You're here to know if I like the movie about the ginormous radioactive lizard and the fantastically large big ape, and what this movie is all about. So with all that said, I won't be touching on any spoilers here, of course. I will be touching on specifically what you can see in the trailers and just giving my general thoughts on the movie. As of filming this, I'm actually a couple days out from when the embargo lifts and when you guys are going to be seeing this, but I actually just got home from seeing the public screening mixed with press, so I actually got to see it with an audience, which was nice to kind of hear some of the reactions to some of these moments. And what I could say about this movie right out of the gate is that if you were going into Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire as a ginormous fan of this new era of Monsterverse films, and you just want to see all-out fun, big, over-the-top, vibrant, and colorful action, and the human narrative is not necessarily something you're overly necessarily even interested in, then you are going to have a great time. Now, if you're going into this movie expecting a strong human narrative with deep, compelling threads that you can really latch onto, or even something that's more dramatic and serious and touches on some more human themes like Godzilla -1 from just this past year that touched on war and things like survivor's guilt and touched on tons of things that are actually human conditions, then you're maybe not going to enjoy this film. I think this is a movie that is definitely leaning far more into the action, the big over-the-top spectacle, the colors, the vibrancy of it all, than it is a story. And I was all in for that. If you guys have been following this channel, you know I'm a huge Kaiju fan. While I haven't covered all of the Godzilla and King Kong films here on the channel, I have covered all of the ones in this current run of the Monsterverse films coming out of America, and I have covered a couple other films that are coming from the Japan side of the Godzilla productions. And I've also covered a couple of other ones in the mix as far as King Kong and Godzilla. I want to go back and do a full set of reviews for the ones I haven't gone around to cover, which is a lot of them, but I have talked about it on many occasions that I am a ginormous fan of Kaiju films, most notably Godzilla and King Kong, and when the two come together, it's a great time. And so if you've seen the trailers for this movie, you know one of the most notable things about the trailer is the fact that Godzilla and Kong are not versing each other this time, but instead they are working alongside one another to take on a new big threat. So let's get into what this movie is all about without getting too deep into spoilers. The movie opens up and we're reintroduced to characters played by Rebecca Hall and Brian Tyree Henry, as well as Kaylee Hoddle, and a new character played by Dan Stevens named Trapper. All of these characters, of course, are involved with Monarch in their own ways. I won't get into the nitty-gritty and all that because I'm sure you guys just want to know what the big deal is with this movie. They hear a distress call coming from Hollow Earth, which is, of course, where King Kong is at the tail end of Godzilla vs. Kong. He has gone to Hollow Earth. Godzilla has stayed up on the surface, and they pretty much have peace. The two of them are not going to bother each other as long as they don't step into each other's territory. But down at the Hollow Earth where King Kong is, there is some sort of new threat that is starting to arise, and now Godzilla and Kong, as well as some others, must work together to take on the new big bad known as the Scar King, who is an ape just like King Kong, and so he must now deal with the fact that he has discovered more of his kind. But there's one big bad amidst them all who wants to conquer, rule, and torture people of his kind, or apes of his kind, and King Kong is not about that. So, of course, he works alongside Godzilla to take this mofo out. And that's the base premise of this movie. That's what you need to know. There's a distress call down there, and the two of them work to figure it out. And there's some more that happens in the mix. There's some more things that happen with certain characters in here. There's a whole slew of other characters that are introduced. And one thing that I really enjoyed about this movie as well is that if you've seen the trailers, you've seen only a few of the monsters that are in the movie, and there are actually quite a few others that are not showcased in the marketing, which I thought was pretty cool and gave me a big smile on my face as a big fan of these franchises sequences and these monsters. And on that level, I just have to say again, the spectacle, the action, the vibrancy, the colors, the look, the feel of this movie, while it can look like a really good video game cutscene at times, I ultimately was absolutely entertained by this movie from beginning to end. I genuinely did not find myself bored at a single second of this movie. And while we have something like Godzilla Minus One, which was awesome and had great, badass, beautiful action sequences with Godzilla at the center this past year, that was more about the humans though, and gave us a rich human story that touched on war and kind of the survivor's guilt and the impacts of war on a society, most notably in Japan after World War II, and it touches on real human themes and emotions. And that movie is beautiful and dramatic and super serious in a lot of ways, while also being big and over the top in other ways. This movie asks you to say, hey, that's great that we have Godzilla Minus One, it's awesome, but how about for right now, you just sit your ass down in the seat, eat some popcorn, drink some soda, stuff your face with some candy, and just enjoy big over-the-top action that doesn't really ask much of you when it comes down to narrative depth. And on one hand, I can already tell that that's not going to work for a lot of people, but for me, honestly, I was entertained. I had a really good time. If you ever grew up like I did and just had a bunch of toys of dinosaurs or some of these monster characters like Godzilla and King Kong and various other monsters, and just kind of threw them all together and had them fight and had a big over-the-top little, explosion of imagination in your mind, this movie is literally that put to screen in the best possible way. And if you're somebody who's not into these kind of movies, if the big over-the-top kaiju monster action, titans going head-to-head isn't your thing, and you want something that's more rich in narrative, then I'll just say this is not going to be your thing, because this movie has a very simplistic, straightforward narrative. And when it comes down to our human characters that are in the mix here, while I do think there are nice emotional beats that work, specifically from characters that are played by like Rebecca Hall, as well as some great comedic moments that come from Dan Stevens and Brian Tyree Henry, the movie for the most part is not really doing much with those human characters outside of exposition and them sometimes doing something to help our titans within their big fights throughout the course of the movie. Outside of that, there isn't really much in the narrative that is pushed forward or pulled back too much by our human characters. There are only a few moments in the movie that are really pivotal where our humans need to do something in order for our titans to be able to do what they do in this movie. Outside of that, the rest of the story is really just them kind of witnessing what's happening with the titans. And in a lot of ways, this is more of a Kong movie than it is a Godzilla film. Now, some people might be disappointed to hear that, but what I will say is that if you've seen the movie, then you know that Godzilla definitely has some fantastic key moments in this film, especially in the third act, and all of the Godzilla stuff in this movie is badass. But what I will say is that it feels like far more of a Kong central film, which was honestly my favorite part of the film. I love King Kong, and I think that they were able to do such great things with him when it comes to his facial moments, when it comes to like little moments in his eyes that give him so much humanity and allow us to see more in his character. And I think there are some fantastic moments between him and other characters in this movie. And if you've seen the trailer, you know that there is a younger little ape character that's introduced here, which is of course a reference to Kong Jr. from back in the day in those previous films. And so, I really enjoyed seeing that implemented into this film as well. The dynamic between him and this young ape I thought was really fun and funny and badass at moments. The two of them were a lot of fun to watch throughout the course of this film, and there's just a lot of really great moments between these monsters. There's a whole sequence when we're first introduced to the villain of this film, the Scar King, that is just all apes, and all of it is just kind of going off of their facial reactions to things, their eyes, and there isn't any dialogue in this whole little sequence. And that was honestly my favorite portion of the film, because you didn't have humans in the mix trying to give us exposition to tell us what we need to be understanding about the sequence. It was all done just by these CGI apes doing what they do, and the director and the people who were behind animating these apes giving us enough in their facial expressions and what's happening to not only give us fun action, but to also tell a story and get across dialogue between these apes without us ever having to hear a word. And I genuinely loved that portion of this movie. That was probably my favorite sequence. So I liked having Kong at the center here. But again, I do want to really highlight that though Godzilla is not a central focus of the story throughout, he still has a huge presence in the film, and the all-out crazy action at the end of the film definitely leads up to some of the greatest Godzilla moments that we've ever gotten put to screen. Now, if I had to put my critic hat on and just get a little bit more serious about it, yeah, like I said, the human narrative here is really relegated a lot of times to a lot of exposition, a lot of like, hey, let's go there to do this. Oh, the Titans need help, so we should go use this thing that we just so happen to have to help them in their fight. And so moments like that just feel like they're just kind of there for those moments. and it does kind of create this very simple and hollow human narrative that ultimately doesn't really serve the movie. It's serviceable for the movie and for the plot that's at hand, but there isn't really an abundance to it. And a character that's pivotal to the story here, but ultimately felt kind of cringe at times, is the young girl who we saw in the last Godzilla vs. Kong, who was able to communicate with Kong via sign language. That character's name is Gia, played once again by Kaylee Hoddle. And I think for the most part, she's fine here in this movie. In the first film, she was a lot cuter, she was a lot younger, and so this innocent kind of connection she had with Kong felt a little bit more tangible, if you will. Whereas in this film, the young actress who plays this character is very similar to how she was in the last film, even though years have passed. She's a little bit older, and so she just kind of has most of her scenes being relegated to her kind of looking worried, looking after Kong, wondering where Kong is, trying to communicate with Kong with a worried face on. And there are some nice touching moments between her and her now adopted stepmom, played by Rebecca Hall, but there ultimately wasn't an abundance given to her throughout the course of the movie to do, except for the later part of the film where they make her a pretty pivotal part of the story and what's going on. So it's a mixed bag when it comes to the humans, without a doubt. And I think that, again, if you're going into this hoping for a good human narrative, especially after Godzilla -1, then I think you're going to be disappointed. But there is still fun to be had. And as I mentioned before, Brian Tyree Henry and Dan Stevens, I thought they were the funniest part of the movie and kept me entertained plenty of times. There were some great, just cheesy moments with the two of their characters that sometimes are a little bit cliche, but I ultimately really enjoyed it. And Dan Stevens, while he's not necessarily all that important in this movie outside of some of those moments, like I said, where they kind of help the Titans, he was still funny to me in the movie, and I enjoyed his energy in this film as his character of Trapper, who's like a veterinarian for these big titans, which I think is pretty funny, to be honest. Outside of that, my other biggest gripe would be that the movie is a little bit all over the place, and for like the first 30 or 40 minutes of the film, and even in portions later in the film, there is a lot of like, we're going all the way over here, we're going over here, and the movie's constantly showing us a different country, a different state, a different place that we're at. We're in Hollow Earth, we're at on the surface, we're in Egypt, we're in Rio de Janeiro, we're all the way over in the Arctic. We're all over the place throughout the course of the film, touching on various characters and various titans that are in different places. And so I think it's easy enough to follow, but undoubtedly it does feel a little bit all over the place. So I think that there is going to be people who watch this film and just don't like it, that just aren't crazy about big over-the-top Titan action and just want to have a nice story told to them, and they're not going to get that here. And then there's going to be people like me who just love these characters and just are okay with sitting down with a big bloated action movie that is just asking you to sit down and enjoy yourself, turn your mind off and not care about it, and just see badass action. And on that level, it 110% delivers. If you're here for Godzilla and Kong, big over-the-top vibrant action, it's beautiful. The CGI is great, a little cartoony at times, but it fits the look and the feel of the film and never feels distracting, in my opinion. And the third act of this film alone is worth the price of admission, in my opinion. And again, this is coming from somebody who likes big bloated over-the-top action films that just sometimes ask you to sit down, shut the fuck up, and enjoy yourself instead of being critical. As somebody who talks about movies on here and has criticized tons and tons of movies, if a movie is trying to be a drama and it doesn't necessarily succeed, then that's a different thing to talk about. But if a movie is just trying to be a big over-the-top fun action movie about a big lizard and a big ape, then sometimes you just have to realize there's no real reason to overanalyze this. This is a movie that's asking you to have fun, and I had fun, and that's ultimately what I have to say the most about this movie. I had a blast with it. I had a really good time, and I look forward to checking it out again. I think that the Monsterverse, you know, could be better narratively, and I hope that as this franchise continues, because they typically make pretty good money, that, you know, we'll hopefully get better stories, especially after the success of Godzilla -1, showing how you can have such a great action element of the film, but also a great story at the center of it. I'm hoping that because this movie was already in production and was pretty much done by the time the -1 came out, that moving forward, some of these legendary picture films can maybe start to, you know, take a lesson from -1 and give us some stronger human narratives while also being able to maintain the badass fun spectacle that these movies are. But when it comes down to the fun badass spectacle, it's present. It was fun. I had a blast. I'm going to stop rambling now. I hope you guys enjoyed Godzilla X Kong, Godzilla Kong, whatever you want to call it. But definitely let me know down below. Did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? What was your favorite moment? What was your least favorite moment? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below. I'm sure there's going to be a variety of opinions on a movie like this, and it really is going to depend on your taste. But I look forward to hearing all the various opinions. So if you guys enjoy content like this and early reviews for movies like this, definitely hit that subscribe button. Stick around, as there'll be plenty more movies to talk about here on the channel, and I look forward to hearing from all of you guys on your thoughts on various movies. Again, a big thanks to you guys for watching, and I see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.